One. Hello. Hello, everyone. I'm Joanna Penn, and this is Orna. We are here for the Alliance of Independent Authors Advanced Self-Publishing Salon for November 2018. How the year speeds by.
November 2018. Who could believe it? Yeah.
I know. It's absolutely crazy. Well, tonight we have a packed show for you because we are talking about 5 tips for growing your author business. And I'll be talking about Novelists Inc. and Orna will be talking about Digital Book World. And we're also going to kind of get the publishing news into our tips. But first, as we always do, we like to have a bit of an update because first, we are writers. We don't just talk about writing. So, Orna, why don't you give us an update from the Alliance and also for you?
Yeah, well, ALLi has a very nice, significant milestone coming up. It's actually tomorrow. We are making a submission to the governmental all-party writers group on author income. And we'll be doing that submission alongside the Publishers Association and the Literary Agents Association, essentially all the bodies of publishing. And it's the first time that self-published writers will have been represented at that group and at the governmental level. So we're pretty pleased about that. And we canvassed the members about, what one thing do you want to say to the government about author income? And we've got lots of really interesting answers. And I'm looking forward to both having the experience, but also to what will come out of it. And we will use it, obviously, to lobby further. It's not just a UK, it starts here, but it will give us leverage to make it happen in other places. So it's a significant milestone for Open Up to Indie Authors campaign, and we're really pleased that that's happening. Aside from that, it's the time of year where we upgrade all our guidebooks to make sure that they're up to date, and we're also upgrading 3 websites, the main ALLi site, which is very overdue, an upgrade, and making some changes between the self-publishing advice site and the self-publishing conference site. So lots going on at that level. And our new member magazine is out, and you are the cover girl. I just thought I'd mention that.
And surprisingly, I think talking about author business.
Yeah, which was our theme for that quarter. And who better indeed to be our cover girl talking about that topic. And we'll be talking lots about that topic here today as well, I know. On my own front, pre-orders. You talked about pre-orders last time, and it really just it was like a wallop over the top of the head for me, because I remember when I got all excited about pre-orders happening for everybody, and then I, kind of got on and didn't do anything about it. So it brought me into thinking all about marketing and how I market and how we market it as indies, and I had some ideas about that. I'll talk a little bit later in the show, but just setting up around that idea of pre-orders working through a series and one leading to another and all of that. Lots to think about there. So setting that up, there's an awful lot to do in the background to make that work.
Yeah.
But I think it's really well worth it. It's my first time to do it, and then once it's done. But it's one of those things, and then you think, oh, but if I do that, then that will mean that, and then I haven't thought about that, and all that kind of stuff. The other thing that's been happening big in my life is poetry. I've always been writing poetry, but publishing very much took a secondary. It was in the background for me, and non-fiction and fiction were in the foreground, and poetry was very much in the background. I really didn't expect much from publishing poetry because I was brought up in the old traditional publishing system where poetry is very much a minority sport. Not for indies, not anymore. And that was one of the interesting things that came out of DBW that I might have time to talk about, but it's really big, really happening for poetry. So I have started a Patreon page and now have added a specific tier for poets about making a life and a living in poetry. And I'm going to do a podcast just once a month with somebody who is trying to do exactly that, make their living from poetry, which is now possible. Who knew?
Wow, that's amazing.
It's really, really incredible. Robin Cutler at DBW was telling me that poets are now the highest selling genre on Ingalls Park, and poetry is now for sale in Target.
I love that. I absolutely love that. We live like all the myths, like whenever people are like, oh, well, this is true. Well, no, maybe it's not true. So what else? What can you question?
absolutely. And I realized how, I don't consider myself to be somebody who's, I think that I'm questioning things. I think that but I really saw myself as stuck, in limited thinking around poetry. So a whole new lease of life in my publishing life now around poetry, and it's really interesting to me and so rewarding, and I think poetry is very suited to the times. It's very needed, but also it really suits busy lifestyles. It's short, it's a fix, you can ingest fairly easily, and yeah, it's great to see it, and it happens at all sorts of levels, so readers can meet poetry exactly where they are. So.
And as I was saying to you before the call, but just for everyone else, the whole flash fiction market is really taking off. So I think there's a difference to me, flash fiction is it has to be a story, like it has to be a finished story rather than a thought, or something. And it doesn't need. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, as in a poem doesn't have to be a story. But to me, flash fiction has to be a story. And in Bath, there's a really lively flash fiction festival and community. So I've been like, wow, I didn't even really know about this. And again, on Twitter, there are writing prompts. On Instagram, there are people doing their flash a bit like they're doing their poetry. So yeah, this kind of super short, well, not even super short. I mean, sort of 300 words to 1,000 words, I guess. It's brilliant. And I want to do some myself. Like, I feel like I want to.
Sure. I mean, it's a coming back, I think. There were magazines devoted to fiction at that length years ago. In all sorts of different, your fishing magazine, your women's magazine, they all carried fiction. And then that just stopped. And nobody really knows why, or well, I don't know why. I must investigate sometime, but it just died as a market for writers, and you couldn't do it anymore. And then one of the exciting things about self-publishing was fiction writers were able to publish and sell again, and now to see short fiction coming back and being saleable again, it's really, really great. And then finally, the other thing that's happening for me, I'm just going format crazy. Hardbacks. I've just discovered hardbacks. I saw them being made at the Ingram. We had a site visit in Nashville when I was over there, and just saw them being made. And it's so simple. It's just the exact same cover, but just put onto a piece of cardboard, literally, and a human being wraps it around the book. I mean, it was just great just seeing it being made. So, turning everything into just going to have a hardback version as well. And that's the joy of POD. Why wouldn't you, kind of thing?
Yeah, and speaking of hardbacks, it's
mine. Gorgeous. I haven't got any yet. Oh, that is really, really lovely.
So I'm really excited about it. Same as you. I've just sort of discovered hardbacks and then realized, and this is the same 5x8. So it's the same interior file. So yeah, exactly. Jane just did a different cover.
Exactly. You don't have to do anything particularly special. That was what I realized. It took the tour for me to actually understand that it's not hard at all.
No,
and there's kind of thing you should just do.
And there's not actually a massive need for a book. As in, you could do a poetry small books. I think
I'm going to.
Something. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to, because again, people buy books for different reasons, and a gift book, a hardback, people often want to buy. So it's just fantastic to be able to offer them that.
Plus, it looks really good for comparison pricing. So on Valley of Dry Bones now, I've got the ebook, the normal paperback, a large print, and a hardback. And the audiobook will be out in the next month. And together, the price, I mean, the ebook now just looks incredible value at $4.99, because the hardback is like $12.99, and then the paperback is like $7.99. So it makes it just look like, and how many authors, traditionally published authors, these days get hardbacks?
Almost none. Yeah, almost none. I mean, you have to be really big in fiction to get a hardback, and even then they don't really sell. They're really seen as sort of an advance announcement almost. Very few people sell fiction. I'm talking about, obviously, non-fiction, cookery books and stuff like that do really well in hardback. But I mean, there is no writer really, who's doing print I think everybody should just do it. It's not hard to do, and it's just there, and why not?
Yeah, so I'm going through my backlist, doing them all. You are doing that. So I find it hilarious that at this point in the indie movement, we're now talking about hardbacks. Like it feels like that should be a step back. But actually with POD, as you say, and with Ingram, it's why wouldn't we? So let's all do hardbacks.
Yes, hardback move. Everything's a movement now. Hardback movement coming up.
Okay, what else? Oh yes, so I launched Valley of Dry Bones, as I mentioned. So that doing all and got into a really grumpy state because of all the last, all the T's and I's and fixing little typos and all of that finishing energy you have to do. And then of course the book went live, and now I'm done with it. So that was last week. Oh, can you hear me? You can. Okay. Oh, okay.
You can.
Oh, yeah, sorry. There's definitely some audio issues going on here. So I did the launch there, and that was great. Actually, what I am doing differently, so BookBub now have a featured, well, I don't know, I can't remember what it's called, like featured deal on new releases. So essentially there's an email going out tomorrow as we talk, about a full price new book, and that is actually the same kind of price as the featured deal. So it's expensive, but because it's a new release and it's full price, then hopefully I'm going to make my money back. I've never done this before. This is a new offering from BookBub, so we'll see how it goes. But I thought it was worth testing out. I think they're starting to change their business model very much more towards full price. So that's quite interesting. The other thing, the big thing that's happened to me is that I got an advance for the first time in my author life, which is quite funny, really, because of course, most traditionally published authors will have had an advance at some point, but indies don't get advances. That's not what happens. And so, I've done foreign rights deals before, but I've always done royalty only. So I just got my first advance for Korean rights, which I talked about before, but the money actually arrived. So I can now say that's my first advance. It won't pay for the holiday in New Zealand, but it was still amazing.
It's another milestone. There are all these little things in an author life that are significant and meaningful, and that's definitely one of them. Yeah, because it means somebody has enough confidence in your book that they're actually willing to put that money up front. So
so I thought that was a fun thing. And then the other thing is I've been doing all this voice coaching because I want to narrate some of my short stories, and I'm on, like, this morning I did it for the 4th time. I'm doing the same story and then getting feedback on the story, and then doing it again after the feedback. And so I'm really learning a lot. It's fascinating. Really, just I think all the tips are going to help me with podcasting, let alone anything else. So I am going to do my short stories and possibly a novella, but I'm not going to do a full book. I've decided.
Not yet.
For fiction, I will do my non-fiction myself, but it's just the voices, the different voices, difficult.
You need to be an actor,
Yeah, you really do.
To do fiction properly.
Yeah. So to do it justice and to do justice to the listener. So that's cool. So that's pretty much my updates. Is there anything else on updates you wanted to do before we move into our tips and news?
Let's go into tips and news because that's of most value to people.
Yes. Okay. Tips and news. Although hopefully we've given you some tips already. But so essentially, I was at Novelists Inc., which is for professional fiction writers. You have to have published a certain number of books and earned a certain amount of money. So this was not a newbie conference. It's for members only. So again, it's not open to general public. It's a lot of high-powered authors and a lot of authors who've been making some kind of living for a long time. Many of them come out of traditional and gone indie, most hybrid. So a really sort of high level audience. And you've been at Digital Book World. Just tell us the audience for that before we get into the tips.
Yeah, I was at Matera, which is another novelist conference of a very different order with a very mixed sort of attendance. It's small conference in a lovely part of Italy and attracts all sorts of people for that reason. It's very interesting, but very, very different. It's not commercially driven like Mink, much more craft focused, but they were hugely interested in indie, you know, and in the possibilities in on our side of the house, as it were. So there were agents and that there as well. So it was a far more typical author conference. And Digital Book World is different again because it is bringing together of what the organizer Bradley Metrick calls the wide world of publishing. So author publishers were there, micro publishers, you know, small traditional publishing houses, and then corporate publishing, and also business publishing. So you know, there is this whole thing now where every business is essentially a publishing business in terms of social media at a minimum, but a lot of bigger corporations are actually opening their own publishing wing, because in the old days they would have got a traditional publisher in, but they're seeing, well, hold on a second, you know, that doesn't make commercial sense. So it was a great conference in that sense of bringing everybody together and seeing how, you know, which parts are relevant to us as author publishers and which parts are not. You know, it was interesting, and there was very much a focus on voice and technology generally, but particularly voice. Again, the organizer has a podcast, a voice first podcast, and he's hugely interested in voice technology. Amazon Alexa was there as a major sponsor and doing lots of interesting things. So yeah.
And we'll come back to that. But the first tip we have here is embrace self-publishing 3.0. And you have done a fantastic talk on that. So I urge anyone who hasn't listened to that to go listen to that. Obviously, I've been in the space for a long time and I still found it really interesting and useful. And as I said to Orna, I think she was possessed by some kind of flow state, because it was a packed talk. I mean, seriously, and yet it was so short. So definitely check that out. There'll be links in the show notes for this podcast, or hopefully it'll be on the feed or something. But Orna, just briefly tell us what Self-Publishing 3.0 is, and how did that go down at the different conferences?
Yeah, so it was interesting presenting it to two completely different groups of people, and it went down, I would say, very well with both, because I think what it does is, when you're in the place that I'm in this business, you just see so many, and you too, you just see so many writers at so many different stages of development, and you really see the broad sweep of things, and you come to understand that there are certain things about an author business, there are certain stages, there's a certain sequence for success, you know, there are steps that you have to take in the right order. You have to realize that you're not just a craft person, that you're also a manager, and you're also, you know, a creative director, you're also an entrepreneur. You've got to be wearing those three hats across the mix. And so it was really about talking to people about that and understanding what it is to be in business as an author, and that this is a new realization for us, really, because a lot of us fell into it by accident, didn't realize that we were in business at all. Some of us went and embraced it wholly from the start with very good business skills, but whichever way you came at it, because it is a creative business, it's got very different and distinct features. And so I think now, only now, after all this time, I fully understand what that is, and I'm actually only now able to write my own definitive book about self-publishing, I think. It was definitive for me, because getting that understanding, getting all that sort of in a row. So there's you as the writer, there's you as the publisher, and then there's you as the entrepreneur, and those three are three different things. And you know, when an author gets those three right, when they integrate, that's when you see success happening. And
yeah, and I think it's really interesting, because to me, that's a bit what we're talking about, like making the most of what you have. This is something that I see as a self-publishing 3.0 thing. You know, I'm obviously been a business person the whole time, but I now, we've just used Airtable. Like, people who don't like spreadsheets, or spreadsheets don't really work for a kind of database thing where you've got, you know, book name, all the different formats, all the different IP licensing. So, you know, now I've got nearly 30 books, and when you look at the number of formats, and I've been keeping it all in a spreadsheet, and then you've got ISBNs, and then you've got countries that you're licensing to, you've got dates when contracts end, for example, Audible licenses. So we're now using Airtable, which is kind of an online thing. To do that, it's much simpler, I think, than the old database type management, and much cheaper, as in it's free, when there are database IP management software out there. But we don't need anything that big because we're not publishers managing thousands of rights, but we still need to actively manage it. So that's another thing I do. But making the most of what you have. So looking at the books you have, what you have done. So have you even done a paperback yet? Have you, you know, we'll come back to wide, but, you know, have you looked at your audio? Have you looked at which platforms your ebooks are on? Like even just basic stuff like that, or linking books at the back, like you're talking about with not just pre-orders, but I've gone back now to link just the books in my series so that at the end they link to each other. Like I hadn't even done that. So this type of attitude in terms of, yes, we're creators, but yes, we also have to think about the business tasks is kind of what you're talking about.
Very much so, and understanding that those business tasks, and this is the real sort of kicker, I think, understanding that those business tasks are potentially very creative, and not consigning them to the zone of I dread do it, I hate to do it. And when an author makes that switch, when you actually realize that, you know, each of those communications, so for example, something that a lot of us do, the email sequence, you know, that tells we want to get the subscriber onto the email list, and then we do it, but then what do we actually do with them? You know, how creative are we in terms of how we speak to our readers at that point? How connected is the tone of the communications that we're having with our readers once they have given us their email address? You know, how consistent is that with the actual work that you're talking about? For me personally, you know, splitting everything out is only something I'm really doing properly now after so many years. It was all a bit mushy really for my readers. It was fine for the people who crossed over, but for those who had a distinct interest, it wasn't so fine. And so, you know, all those kinds of things, putting yourself in the seat of the reader, but also understanding what you're trying to achieve as an author and going your own way with it, you know, having the creative confidence to do it your way is, yeah, it's key to this whole concept of self-publishing 3.0. But self-publishing 3.0 is really saying, you know, that we are in business and we need to be good business people in order to succeed. We are publishers and we need to be good publishers in order to succeed. And that they're two very different sets of skills to being a good writer, which we also need in order to succeed. So we have set out to do something really, actually, it's so big and challenging. It's amazing that anybody does it and does it well. And well,
yeah, and I think it's good. It's good for people who love to learn. And, you know, we were talking about before the show again about beginner's mind. And that brings us on to the second point, which is embrace the rise of audio. And what's, you know, we were talking about the # voice first movement. Like if people are interested, you can go and look on a hashtag #voice first. And this is, again, a movement. This is the, you know, the audio devices in your home. So Alexa, the HomePod, Apple HomePod, Google, whatever their Google one is, you know, or even I did quite a big drive the other week, and now my audiobooks sync with the car. It was the first time I'd really used audiobooks in the car, and I'd been listening up here, get in the car, starts playing. And I love that integration. That's really, and then, you know, get out the car, carry on listening on your headphones, on the phone. That's really amazing. And this voice first movement, the way kids are growing up interacting with voice devices. And also one of the things I saw at NINC, which I've had these realizations when I go to America, not everyone, but most people were wearing Apple Watches. And what is so interesting with the Apple Watch is it's a voice device, but you can move with your finger on it, but it's mainly a voice first device. So those of us who might not be so comfortable with the home pod thing, talking to Siri or whatever on your watch is really interesting. Also, audio books through a phone to your wireless AirPods. I just saw this future of voice interaction without the phone. Like, the phone has been the thing in our hands, and I saw people interacting with the internet and with their apps without a phone. That was fascinating, and that to me is part of this voice first movement.
Very, very much so. And that's, if there was a theme to DBW, because it was very wide ranging, it was around this and the way in which audiobooks, podcasts and voice assistants are converging. So you've got these three kind of separate things. We've always, as indies, had this issue with, how do you market an audiobook? And I think this is where it comes together, really. There is no doubt that this is rising, it's just happening so fast. There's no doubt that very, very soon a majority of people are going to be talking to their computers first rather than typing, because again, why wouldn't you? It will become just so comfortable and so easy, and already the percentages are just flying up there. So for indies, I would see two big opportunities coming out of this, maybe three actually, but marketing of podcasts and audiobooks, I think, once it's coupled with voice assistants. So it's becoming really important again. All these things that are always important for ebooks as well, but now even, because audio will be very precise in terms of how you find, you say to Siri, get me a book that was like the one I've just read, or get me a book about these three things, that's the way in which it's going to happen. So thinking about your metadata and your keywords and all of that becomes even more important with this. And then there is the opportunity for interactive storytelling. And this already is big in children. So voice really allows for this, where they, take a different decision along the way. You've got voice assistants reading to the kids. But I think there's also opportunities in adults that haven't even been explored in terms of, that alternative possibilities of futures and things. I can see new forms in genre like conversational fiction, where you've got forwards and backwards going on, and maybe destiny fiction, fate, which turn you take and how it determines the outcome and all of that. So I think anybody who's interested in this at all, getting in there at this point means, as it often does, that advantage of just being ahead of the game, and it's wide open, because a lot of what's going on in this arena, a lot of the stories that are written, they're not being written by storytellers. They're being written by techies who haven't got a clue how to tell a story. So if you can enter in there and tell a good story, and and use the technology in the way that makes sense for your storytelling. And I use the storytelling in the broadest sense. It could be documentary, it could be nonfiction. It doesn't have to be fiction at all. I think there really are lots and lots of opportunities here, and we're going to be hearing a lot more about this over the next 5 years.
Yeah, and I listen to Bradley's This Week in Voice podcast, and I talk a lot about this on my show, but he will be coming on my podcast in January, and we'll be talking about that. But even like as I'm reading my short stories, I'm actually editing them for voice, because I'm really, and I wrote these originally back in 2013, so my writing has got better anyway, but I'm really finding some of the choice of words or the long sentences, or, some way, now I'm narrating it myself, I'm just very much aware of how things sound. So you might have made a word choice around not to repeat a word, but not repeating a sound is fascinating, and I'm finding instances of this that have really surprised me. So I think as indies, even if you're not going to get into the hardcore stuff in voice, you really do need to be aware of your books being read by a device, because the voices that are available now, they're not robo voices anymore. They are, human sounding. It's so human sounding, in fact, that they are now saying that they want the voice to announce that they are a robot. The Google duplex, people people are saying, well, it should say that it's duplex because the voice is so real. It says and hesitates. So this type of stuff is interesting. So look at your writing, how it is affected by being read aloud, and also consider doing voice marketing, like going on a podcast. You don't have to have a podcast, but have a look at the podcasts in your niche. How can you try and appear on a podcast so that you get used to using your voice more? Because so many of us are quiet and don't get our voices out there.
And I think it's important to say that practice helps here. It can be a bit terrifying at first if you're used to just the written word. And I know there are some people listening who are thinking, I'm never going to do that. And that's fine. But if you are at all interested, the intimate connection created by the voice is definitely something that, even if you're only thinking about it from a marketing perspective, it's well worth thinking about. You know, if you can get comfortable, if you can take some training, you know, if you can actually do this, it takes also some pressure. Writing the written word is much harder work than the spoken word, and the spoken word is much more forgiving than the written word. So you can, again, back to, you know, why you are a writer and how you connect with your readers. It doesn't have to just be the book. It can actually be talking about some of the themes of the book and so on. So, yeah, I suppose the main thing to say is think about it, open up and consider it, experiment a bit, explore, see does it work for you.
Beginner's mind. That's part of our theme as we head into 2019. We're all beginners every month, it seems, at the moment. So let's talk about publishing wide. So in number 3, embrace publishing wide. Now, I was really excited about this. And again, this ties into audio. Many of these things tie together. Some of the bigger developments in audio with wide is Kobo Writing Life is going to have a direct audio platform, hopefully before Christmas, but certainly 2019. Apple at Frankfurt Book Fair said, get ready, we are about to announce our audiobook publishing platform. So what we're going to have is the breaking of the monopoly, really, of ACX. Now, also, I talked to Find Your Way Voices when I was at NINC. They're fantastic. Looking forward to getting my audiobooks out with them. So that's kind of audiobook wide. Some of the other things that I heard at NINC is the book a day author collectives, and this kind of, it freaked me out on one level because I was like, seriously, that's crazy. But think about it, if you have 30 authors writing a book a month, you've got an author collective that can do a book a day. And then I was like, well, what about a book an hour? And there are some author collectives now writing under one brand who are doing, you know, not a book an hour, but they could get there. So I'm not going to mention any names or anything, but this is a business model, I suppose. The publishing fast, publishing mainly on KU, well, only on KU, really taking advantage of velocity. Whereas it just made me feel like, whoa there, that's not what I want to do or have any intention of doing. So what are the ways we can protect our author business by being wide? So instead of trying to compete, no one can compete with a book a day. You just can't. So don't even try to compete. Take a step back and go, what is it that I love? What is it about me that's different? And then also look at the wide publishing around reaching readers in more territories. Yes, it takes some patience, but the opportunities for publishing wide just are positively growing, like, all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's back to that idea of there being 6 or 7 different models for authors, and, you know, I think expanding ourselves beyond the book. So I think going wide also means taking in other ways of shaping our content. And, you know, I've started to use the word content. I used to hate when people use that word, but it does make sense. It does give you the proper, so I don't use it when I've got my writer hat on, but when I put my publisher hat on, it does actually make sense to think about that, because you can think about the ways in which you can shape it up. And Self-Publishing 3.0 is very much about not relying on any one outlet, and be that one trade publisher that publishes your books or one self-publishing service that publishes your books. It's very much about creating a sustainable, ongoing business model that will grow and grow step by step, asset by asset, as you add, you know, your hardbacks, your different formats, your different ways of doing it. And I think that that's, you know, I really do think that that's a safer way to go. It definitely takes longer, and you definitely have to think more about who you are, what your value is, and all of that. When you're in the fast, you know, the publish fast and the one outlet kind of thing, there's no time to think. It's really just like get the next book out, get the next product out there. But there is time under the open model. And I think, you know, Amazon is having a number of problems as it takes on huge technological tasks. The migration from Creative to KDP print being one, and you know, there are issues around ads as well at the moment. And this is making more people realize that, you know, when you just publish with one outlet, you are very dependent. Maybe that's a good thing. So.
Yeah, I've certainly, they've also had a category change. Those of us who use KDP Rocket have seen that. I've also seen that it depends when you're looking, and of course they're always running tests, but my also boughts completely disappeared off my Amazon.com site. So if you go on, if I went onto my own book page, I would not see also boughts. It was just 3 lines of ads instead. And to me, that is, so does that mean that Amazon are going to an ad first model instead of a book recommendation engine? That's an interesting question in itself. But as you say, the technical changes of moving CreateSpace to KDP, we've seen loads of issues with print books. So if you're on Ingram Spark, you won't have seen such an issue. And then some people have seen ebooks disappearing with, I think Amazon's been migrating some of their data centers. So some things have, and having worked in IT for like 13 years, these things happen and they tend to all just calm down after a while. But the number of things happening right now, especially as CreateSpace's help desk was kind of good, and now it's not so good. So I think
inundated, yeah.
Yes, they're inundated. So the thing is, there are kind of 2 sides, one of which is positively choosing to publish wide because you want to reach readers all over the world in multiple formats. Like, that's why I do it, why you and I have done it from the beginning. Then there's the reactive, so that's the proactive side. And then there's the reactive side, which is, okay, here's some technical issues. What if things change? What if the algorithm changes again? What if KU payments keep dipping? So there's the slightly reactive side, which is, what can I do to protect myself from inevitable change? And in fact, Mike Shatskin, who's been a publishing commentator for a long time, very smart guy, blogged this week on his blog, Idealog, it's called, about how the business model of publishing has to change because of the sheer volume of books. And that was really interesting, because someone like him talking is something that the publishing industry do tend to listen to.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, go wide, go wide, go wide. Embracing going wide. That's our tip number 3.
That's tip number 3. Okay, so tip number 4 is market in a way that you love and don't feel guilty about it. And this was based on a talk that I did at NINC. I did a talk on content marketing, so content all the way. And I basically said, look, people are having issues with ads. If you love ads, you love data, awesome, go for it. But if you're finding that you're just miserable and you don't want to do ads, then don't do ads. Like, there are loads of other options. So obviously we've talked about podcasting. I'm getting hardcore back into blogging and podcasting for fiction sales. So I've got a big project that I'm going to start next year, a new brand, to try and hook in content marketing with fiction. And I'll talk about that more next year. As I hit 10 years of my original podcast, I'm going to start another one to really look at content marketing for fiction. So it really was very much around, do the things that bring you alive. So both, like your talk, for example, on Self-Publishing 3.0, on my podcast, we can change people's lives without them reading our book or our books, and this is so important. Content marketing itself is valid as a thing to do in order to inspire, entertain, and educate. in the same way that writing our books is. So why don't we embrace that? Whereas I feel like with ads, yeah, they are important and I use them, but they disappear just like that. And the time spent on that is not something that compounds. Whereas content is just great. So I'm very much looking at embracing what I love to do with my time as well as what I hope will sell my books. Does that make sense?
Totally. And that's, again, the self-publishing 3.0, banging the drum again, but it is about that thing of creative assets. And a creative asset is something that both, you love to do it. It is a creative project in and of itself, but also it is an asset that doesn't disappear like an ad. It is something that then becomes part of your mix, and it's there, and you can put it to work for you without you having to be present in the room. And there are just so many ways to do that. And we used to think, that nonfiction had the premium on this, but you're thinking about fiction in these terms, and I'm thinking about poetry as well, because I actually don't think it has to be just a nonfiction thing. I think that's just the obvious way it's always been before, but again, question everything. So I've been thinking about this idea of content. It is content marketing, but just framing it slightly differently as attract and subscribe marketing. So it's about pulling your reader towards you with everything that you're putting out there, and getting them to subscribe. And I'm thinking of actually just building the launch around not a date, which is something that traditional publishing has to do because it has to fit into bookstore schedules and so on. We don't have to do that. For me, I think how it's going to be from now on is when I have X amount of subscribers, pre-orders, in place, then the book goes out, and not until, so I'm beginning to think about that, and all the ways in which you can use content, to make that heart and soul connection with the reader. And as you say, you don't have to wait until they read your book, but actually, if you get it right, they will read your book because they will want more of you. And the other thing that became clear to me in working out the whole self-publishing 3.0 thing was that you need different products at different levels. So our book is our core product, but actually a premium product on top of that, and a gift product that you just give away, no strings attached, and your product for a subscriber of some kind. Those four things, I think, when they're in place, people start to make a decent living. But if you're just trying to sell books, unless you are in that publish fast and a particular genre that suits that, it's a hard slog. It's very difficult to make a go of it, I think.
Yeah, and that is actually the other point, is that content marketing itself can make money. So my podcast now is 400 episodes, and it has corporate sponsors. I have Patreon. It has, I do affiliate marketing with it. I, sell webinars as well as books and audiobooks. So that's kind of also what I want to do with, and, with my nonfiction, I've got teachable and training courses. And that's what I'm going to do with fiction. There won't be teachable, but I'm going to do multiple streams of income around content marketing around fiction. So this is the thing. It's what, the self-publishing 3.0 is also acknowledging that authors need more income streams than just books, and to make a happy, healthy living. And to be fair, I love writing. I was at the cafe this morning. I did my 2.5 hours. I cannot spend my entire day writing, being creative. Just cannot. Who can? I mean, nobody. So you've got to do other things anyway if you're full-time. Fair enough. If you're not full-time, then prioritize that writing creation time. But we're talking here about if you want to make a living, then you have to think about these other streams of income, because book sales go up and down and things change, and you've got to have those other streams.
Another book doesn't. And I think there's this myth that there was once a golden era when, writers sold books and everybody lived off their book selling and had their feet up and, just brought a book out once a year, and that was enough to it's never happened. It's a complete and utter myth, always writers supplemented their income with other things, and usually very low paying things like teaching the local university or something, So there are real opportunities here to make a decent living, but yeah, you do have to think about how you structure the product ecosystem is kind of how I think about it. There's probably a better term coming, but that's how I'm thinking about it at the moment.
No, I think that's a good one. That's a good one. So then our final one, number 5, is keep as many rights as possible and think long term. And this, I was really thinking about this because there was a report from the New Publishing Standard, which I love. It's a fantastic blog that reports on everything outside of America. You know, it does report on America too, but it's very much globally focused. And Mark Williams does a great job there. And, you know, they're fantastic. And they reported on a AI coming out of China, because China is a couple of years ahead in terms of AI development from the West. And this AI translated a book from English into Mandarin in 30 seconds. It was 100,000 words, and it took 30 seconds. And then it took a week for an editor to go through and fix up what was necessary. And this book previously, they said, would have taken 6 months. So yes, it needed editing, but it was 30 seconds of first pass translation followed by a week of editing. And when I heard that, because I've been talking about AI translation for a while, and everyone always laughs at me and says, no, that'll never happen. We're so special, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, it's happening. And this, to me, this is huge. And there was another thing that came out this week about a new technology which will make the internet 100 times faster. Wow. And I was like, whoa, what does that even mean for us?
Faster, yeah. Fabulous.
But take those two things together. And this is why I want to keep talking about beginner's mind, because when I look back the 10 years, you know, I keep going on about 10 years because I'm coming up to my anniversary, and I'm like, whoa, you know, it was when the Kindle and the iPhone were just launched, how things have changed. And if you look forward 10 years to 2028, giving those two things that I just mentioned, if you're licensing your rights for worldwide, all languages, all formats, whatever you're signing away for, whatever, how much are things going to change within the next few years? That means keeping your rights would have been a really good idea. Like J.K. Rowling, who obviously did not sign away her ebook rights and kept them with Harry Potter and is now gazillionaire, whereas a lot of authors did just sign away their digitals. This is just fascinating. So this is kind of the final thing, is really, if you are going to license rights, like I've just done with Korean, it's a 3-year deal. It's Korean language, South Korea. So it's very specific, and it's for one book. And what was so funny is they only wanted print rights. And I said, do you want ebook rights? Because I'd love to have the ebook out too. And they were like, no. So I haven't even licensed ebook rights in South Korea for that book. But this is the interesting thing. How soon, I was talking to Camille about French and German, Camille Mofady from Kobo Writing Life. And we were talking about translation into German, French. And I tried this a few years ago and failed miserably because of the marketing. But what does it mean when we can use AI translation and AI voice first? It means like within a few years, we'll be able to do this. So I'm loving this. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you can love it more easily because you're techie. I have to, for all those people whose little hearts are quailing out there as they listen to us, I have to say, hey, I feel your pain, people, because I'm not techie at all, but I'm sure going to learn how. You know, I'm not going to let this opportunity pass because I didn't get to grips with the technology, because it is mind-blowing. And those people who will get to grips with tech, and there's time here, you know, we're talking here at a time where it's just beginning. There's time to take your time, and it's never as hard as you think it is. It's one of those mental block things, and I suffer from it hugely. You know, it's really going to be the difference between those who can make a living doing what they love. The great thing about this technology is it doesn't take up a lot of time. It saves you masses and masses of time. If you were even making these deals or doing these things with people, it takes so much longer to make everything happen. So it's the kind of thing that can be done on the side while you still get the deep work that allows you to do your creative craft. And that is sort of miraculous for somebody like me who was there at the beginning, you know, when none of this was there at all, and had, you know, 20 years the old way under my belt before any of this started. So I will definitely be learning how.
Yeah, and as ever, we will be here. I'm certainly not intending to go anywhere, and neither is Orna. So we will continue to try and navigate you through the time ahead. And of course, I am always early, so we're talking about several years' time. But I think it's better to start socializing these things. And in fact, as soon as you mention it, so the blockchain stuff, for example, I hope people are also finding this. I'm noticing articles about blockchain in all kinds of industries now because it's become talked about in the author space. And so I think that's part of it. It's socializing the vocabulary and the possibilities so that when they do become more mainstream, you're not caught off the, you know, on the hoof, and then you can't take advantage of it. So yeah, I think these things are important. So just before we finish, what is happening in the next month for you or ALLi or anything?
Website upgrades, but tomorrow we talk to the government.
That sounds exciting. I'm looking forward to hearing about that. I am going to Philadelphia this weekend, where I will be speaking at the Book Baby conference on how to make a living with your writing, and also really interested in hearing Brian Judd speak. And I'm sure you know, but you know, for the audience, Brian Judd is one of these guys who specializes in bulk sales. And I read his book years ago, and I'm looking forward to hearing him speak, because this is another business model that, you know, people basically get a print run that they've licensed the cover to like a lawyer or something, and they just get handed 20 grand and just do a print run with a brand on the front. Or they license Who Moved My Cheese with IBM. I think that was the biggest story, or whoever it was. Might not have been IBM, don't quote me. But that, I'm really looking forward to that. I'm also narrating my 3 audiobooks, and I'm going to get out my backlist in hardback. That's probably, well, maybe not all of them, but quite a few.
We speak next time, we'll have hardbacks. Yeah.
Loads of them. Okay, so you can find us here again next month. I'm at thecreativepenn.com. And Orna, where are you?
I'm at the allianceindependentauthors.org and ornaross.com.
Fantastic. All right, happy writing, everyone, and happy publishing.
And business.
Happy business. Bye.